Let's go through the list, and just as names pop up, Tom, just give me whatever comes to mind here. Let's take a look. You mentioned
Sure.
Wills and Delpit. So there you go. Day one, of course, they take the offensive tackle. The only question about him, I think, is can he move from the right side to the left, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that's that big of a deal, and we heard Andrew Berry say a couple weeks ago that tackles are tackles, and I tend to agree. I think in Bill Callahan, they have a very good offensive line coach. This kid is clearly an unbelievably stud of a player. He was blocking for Tua Tagovailoa's blind side while at Alabama, so I don't think it's any big deal for him to go from the right to the left. And Delpit's a guy, Les, that in watching LSU as much as we all did last year when they won the national championship, he used to jump off the screen to me. I mean, he was a guy that was consistently making plays for that LSU defense, and I think he's a really solid pick and obviously a place of need for the Browns. In terms of Elliott, heard nothing but good things about him. Phillips is the one guy that I was a little unsure about. I thought there were maybe a couple of linebackers better at that spot. Bryant, I mentioned before. Nick Harris, now here's a kid that played center and guard at Washington, and they really raved about them and really did their homework on him. And I'll be honest, Les, Donovan-Peoples-Jones is a guy that I think is one of the biggest steals in the draft to get him in the 6th round. As an Ohio State guy and obviously a Big Ten fan, I've watched my share of Michigan games, and with all the problems they had at quarterback up there, he's still a guy that was able to make plays, and I think his best days are still ahead of him. I really like that kid a lot.
Yeah, I thought he was going in as a 4th rounder at the most, but he held off till the 6th. We don't want to hear that Ohio fans hate Michigan. We don't want to hear that, do we?
I think that is one of the most overrated things that's happened around here, and I think a lot of it had to do less with Braylon Edwards kind of used it as an excuse, I thought, in many ways. Look, there's been some great Michigan players that have played for the Browns. Leroy Horde, Steve Everett, Tom Darden, just a few to come to mind. So I don't think people really make that big a deal about it, as long as you're playing well, right?
In the Belichick days here, other than Bernie, I think that Steve Everett was the most popular, and that's hard for a lineman to be, but I thought he was among the most popular players on the team.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of an overplayed narrative at this point. And like I said, I really like this kid. He was one of the most highly touted high school recruits going to Michigan. And then, they were cycling through quarterbacks, up until Shea Patterson kind of, solidified that job over the last season and a half. They were constantly changing. I think that was a big problem up there. And Harbaugh really hasn't been sure of what kind of offense he wants to run. So, like I said, I think the Browns really got themselves a steal there.
Yeah, and I think Urban Meyer was high on him also. So that covers the Ohio State thing. Let's take a look. There's some undrafted free agents signed today. Let's see if any of them stick out, or are they just practice players?
I think they're just guys at this point. I really haven't done my homework, I'll be honest with you, less on a lot of them. Always good to have a Princeton guy in the building. Another one, right? They got plenty of Ivy Leaguers over there now. So, hey, listen, there might be a gem or two in there that they find. There might be obviously some practice squad guys or potentially some special teamers. So, the one thing about this year, Les, that was very interesting was one of the reasons maybe you saw so many SEC guys and big program guys taken was that, the teams weren't able to bring a lot of these guys in because they just couldn't travel. So there might be a couple of hidden gems in there as well.